So, I want to ask y'all a question. When did you first become familiar with Starkit's prophecy? I asked this question back in December, following an immediate high of deep cleaning my apartment. Looking back, the combination of chlorine and formaldehyde likely fired off more than a few wayward neurotransmitters in conjunction with my rewatch of Sarah Zed's My Immortal videos. Now, Starkit came to mind for a few reasons. I'd introduced my girlfriend to its wacky world of colorful absurdity via Moon Kitty's animated series only a few months prior. Moreover, I'd gone through the footage again in September when editing my interview with Moon herself for Riddle Me This. With that little puff of a breeze refreshing my memory, several story beats rang familiar as Sarah discussed the legacy of My Immortal and its question of authorship, such as the convoluted narrative, the Mary Sue nature of the protagonist, the beta reader best friend, the omnipresent grammatical and spelling errors, and, of course, the ongoing dispute over intentionality. Did Tara Gillespie deliberately write My Immortal as a parody of fanfiction at the time, or did she Frankenstein a happy accident with Elmer's glue and duct tape? And so, it got me thinking, do people still believe Starkit's prophecy, which has long been heralded as the My Immortal of the Warriors fandom, was, quote-unquote, real? A sincere effort conceived by a naive 11-year-old child, harshly condemned by the internet's literate elite? Or do they, realize it's an obvious post? Well, A quick look at the comments on YouTube and the Starkit wiki suggests that, yeah, the jury's still out on that one. That was admittedly my first surprise. The second came with the Twitter poll results. As evidenced by the staggering 1,070 votes, most people nowadays were introduced to Starkit through Moon's animated series. Granted, the results aren't perfect as they were confined to Twitter, and can't ignore the sampling bias since Moon retweeted it. But I can only assume it holds true for most fans of the modern series. The passage of time is simply erase the context behind Starkit and its author's intentionality from memory. Or, hell, it had until I decided to make this video. I've spent far too long deep mining the archives of FF.net and Warrior's Wish over the past several months, and I've got a lot to say, including unearthing the identities of who I believe to be the actual authors of Starkit's prophecy. I know what you're thinking, don't give me that. But I promise this is not some fallacious clickbait or some silly hijinks for a giggle. I cannot tell you how many hours I poured into researching the authors. Good golly god, what is my life? That said, I genuinely believe that understanding the context surrounding Starkit's authorship and the fandom of the time brings a new level of appreciation for this wacky little romp, and further illustrates how far we have, and in many cases haven't, come as fans of the series over the past decade. Oh, and to clarify what will inevitably be a confusing head-scratcher, I'm going to primarily refer to the story itself as Starkit and the protagonist as Gleamstar. Trust me, it just makes life easier. Now, that's a lot of fluff and preamble. Let's get on with the show, shall we? In the last dying breath of the 2000s, Starkit's prophecy was conceived by the then unknown xdark.rosesx, aka Darky. Initially published on December 31st, 2009 as a romance western, the fanwork stars the titular Starkit as she is born into ThunderClan and prophesies to defeat the evil Holly and Tigger. Many a shenanigan ensues, including, but not limited to, excessive author notes, inappropriate flirting, author self-inserts, the mathematical constant pi, gratuitous Japanese TM.
That's not kawaii at all.
Plebeians, Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, Christianity baiting, Satanism, homophobic homophones, Apollo bestowing the gift of prophecy upon unwitting mortals, an enemies to lovers speedrun, Slash as the gateway drug to lesbianism, the miracle of birth, deviation from the norm will be punished unless it is exploitable, set to 1930 show tunes, Jesus Christ Star, and much, much more. The fanfic received relatively limited fanfare in its first few months of life on fanfiction.net. A Wayback Machine archive shows that by April 1st, it had only about 26 reviews to its name. A not insignificant amount for 3.5k words, sure, but nowhere near the virality Starkit would go on to later realize. Starkit really only began to see traction going into the summer months of 2010, thanks in large part, if not entirely, to the efforts of Warrior's Wish. Which, oh boy. How many people remember us Wishians? Oh. Shoot, how to summarize. Well, the Cliff Notes version is that Warrior's Wish was a fan site founded in 2005 by a user named Blizz, with a forum of the same name opening the year after in 2006. It was by far the largest Warrior Cats fan site on the web at the time, and was even acknowledged by Vicky Holmes herself when she named Shadow Clan's leader Blizzard Star as a tribute to Blizz in Code of the Clans. So yeah, Warrior's Wish was a big deal for a mid-2000s fandom. Like I said, it was the biggest Warriors forum on the net, up until the official Warrior Cats forum launched in 2009 anyways. I digress. On May 31st, 2010, a full 5 months after Starkit debuted to widespread acclaim, a user named Flametail posted a thread about it in the general discussion board Random Babble.
So I was innocently browsing amongst fanfiction not long ago, minding my own business as I sorted through the mountains of noobishness that tend to arise from this fandom, when I stumbled across this.
Fan work.
I instantly knew that this was a bad fic and, out of sheer boredom, decided to check it out for a little entertainment. What harm could there be in it after all? I should not have asked myself that question. The main character, Starpaw, is the mother of all Mary Sues. The characterization is made of WTF, and the storyline in general is just indescribably bad. In other words, it is awesome.
And this, my friends, was the turning point. As with all impressionable preteens in the late aughts to early 2010s, desperate to prove our literary supremacy over the noobish plebeians littering our age group, we Wishian users were quick to lampoon the fic as an atrocity to God and possibly all of literature. It was an unequivocal trash fire that we as a burgeoning critic intelligentsia couldn't help but rubberneck and eviscerate with all the revelry and glee of rabid gossip hobbits. It was, by contemporary comparison, the Cats 2019 of the 2010 Warriors fandom. And, of course, we absolutely loved it. It was stupid, it was hilarious, and it made us all feel just the slightest bit better about our own writing capabilities. No one was sure if xdark.rosesx was a troll or, let's just say, a uniquely gifted writer. But the profound terror-badness of it all was an intoxicating cocktail that led the thread to new heights. Within a week, the thread ballooned to 45 pages as Wishians discussed not only Starkit and its updates, but bad Warriors fanfic in general. Not even a full day after the initial post, Flametail called for the birth of a Starkit TV tropes page, and the user Icebreath promptly launched one. It was, as the kids say, a good time. On June 8th, barely a week after Flametail's post, one user named Hawkstar uploaded a dramatic reading of the first few chapters on his YouTube channel, Hawkstar270.
Okay, so, like I said, this ick's my first story. So be nice, plus.
He would go on to dramatize the entirety of Starkit's prophecy, concluding in a 23rd final video on June 9th, 2014, a full 4 years after his initial upload. His playlist gained well over 7,000 views. Inspired by Hawkstar, several other Wishians hopped on the bandwagon with their own readings. Gabby uploaded hers the same day, with Lakestorm following shortly thereafter. Flametail, the original poster, began uploading hers as well on July 20th. Unfortunately, these videos have all either been taken down or privated over the years, leaving Hawkstar's as the sole survivor of the initial dramatic reading Starkit mania. On the Wishian side, at least. The rest of the fandom, oh, they were just beginning! Illusionary Realities uploaded a dramatic reading of the first 2 chapters on August 16th, and the PFF team followed soon afterwards on August 30th. And that's to say, nothing of the multiple readings that have cropped up over the years, such as Fizzy Pumpkin, Ubumir, Dragon Ollie, Epic Brony of Awesomeness, Epic Time 99, Aurora Nux, Wanda Kelly, David the Mavid, XX Honeyspots XX, Uh-Oh Stinky, etc., etc. All in all, dramatic readings were popular, my god. But they were far from the only fanworks inspired by Starkit. Back on the Warriors Wish side of things, Dustfeather uploaded several pieces of Starkit fan art to her DeviantArt, starting with Redpaw, Lakepool, and Gleamstar on August 1st, 2010. Lakestorm, meanwhile, drew perhaps the most iconic piece of Starkit fan art to come out of the early fandom on July 19th with her mock parody cover. Yes, the very one that adorns the TV Tropes page to this day and serves as the backdrop disclaimer for the beginning of Moon's videos. You know, Gleamstar's face there, it kinda looks like she's in the sun. A shining beacon of light casting love over us all. It's a little familiar, huh? I'm sure this will not become relevant later. And, of course, whenever something becomes popular, you always get a wave of imitators trying to mimic the success of the original. Starkit inspired a number of people to create their own bad fics, such as Profice of Hidden Violets, Warriors of the Dark Frost, and Sweatpaws Time. These all cropped up shortly after Starkit started gaining real momentum. Unfortunately, they all seem to have been taken down over the years, though I did manage to at least snag a screenshot of Dark Frost, and, well, its summary is about what you'd expect of a troll fic. She is the most vicious cat in the world with claws that are filed with evil. Dramatic readings, TV tropes, fan art, fanfics, heck, even a few graphic edits cropped up in the midst. As you can see, Starkit mania was very real over those first few months, with folks over on Warrior's Wish leading that hype train on down to literary Flavortown. And also right off a cliff. For you see, while the spike in popularity was certainly a boon for everyone who found Starkit hilarious, it attracted the attention of some less than favorable actors. Not everyone fell in love with the purple star-studded Molly, and were, rather vocal about it.
You stink! All of your words are awful! I haven't even read the story and I got fed up with your spelling errors. What, are you in first grade? Come on! Get it right! Sheesh.
Wow. Kid. No. This is not cool at all. Can't have a cat be named Star. It's too much drama and spelling ain't worth a shit. You really need to either learn to type or just not write at all, because this is horrible. I read the first chapter and wanted to cry. And also, this is a disgrace to warrior cats. Think of the warrior cats.
Now you're just making all the Christians in the world twitch in pain.
Oh my gosh, my eyes! It burns! It burns! And you know what? I do like Jesus. I'm a Christian. And just because your story is making need eye drops doesn't mean I'm not a Christian. So delete this story. Pray to God for forgiveness for posting such an awful story and go back to preschool.
You say you worked hard on this. Did you just tear out your spleen and used it to hit the keyboard? My Immortal had consistency compared to this. And my Immortal was crap. If this was an NES game, the angry video game nerd would destroy most of the continent with his F-bombs if he played this game. If this was an 80s cartoon, the nostalgia critic would foam at the mouth the entire video. If this was an 50s B-movie, Mike and the Bots would have left the theater before it even started. That's how bad this text file is. Note that I didn't use fan fiction. This is not fiction. It's crap. Why am I even reading this?
Of course, most people at the time were less concerned with the played-up homophobia, and much more so with the spelling, grammar, character writing, and dreaded Mary Sue-ness of the protagonist. Stay classy, 2010 fandom. That said, my favorite review, by far, is this one lone commenter. What the hell do you have against gay people? You could get arrested for that. Godspeed, why do you write, you suck? Your priorities are in check. Christians, in particular, seem to find beef with Starkit, more often than not taking offense to the mere suggestion that they were Satanists for critiquing the story.
I will try to be calm about this, but you really ticked me off. I am not a Satanist, I am a Christian. I am deeply offended that you would even insinuate that I'm a Satanist. I also believe that you aren't a Christian. Christians aren't lesbians or gays, as it explicitly states in the Bible that God forbids that sexual behavior. If you want, I will give you the reference. I'm not saying that you're a Satanist, as other people have done, but I refuse to believe that you're a Christian.
Yes, I see now. The Puritans were right. Idle hands truly are the devil's playthings. If you let them wander, they go write homophobia on the internet. I wonder if they got arrested for it. Still, while these negative reviews were rampant, there was an entirely different breed of critique that we must address. One that bizarrely appears to remain alive and well today all these years later. In contemporary fandom, most fan fiction writers use Archive of Our Own, aka AO3, to post their stories. There's been a lot of discourse in recent years over whether certain fan work should be allowed to exist on the site, with AO3 maintaining the need for a maximalist approach to freedom of speech. Now, given I rather enjoy my sanity and that of my audiences, I'm not about to touch that debate with a 10-foot pole. Like, see this pole? Right here? Nope, I ain't touching it. Nuh. It's got cooties and God knows what else. Ugh. No. What I want instead is to use that context in juxtaposition to the very, very different nature of fanfiction.net. If AO3 is too permissive, FF.net is essentially lying in wait at any given moment to wrap your knuckles with a crowbar for daring to tiptoe the line of literary acceptability. How could they have possibly enforced such strict regulations back then, when thousands upon thousands of fics were being uploaded daily, you ask? Well, you enforce it through a bunch of narcs. I mean, volunteer fandom police. Basically, pull together every literary snob you can find, and you get Critics United, a fan group on FF.net dedicated to sniffing out every piece of fan fiction that's quote-unquote breaking the rules, and reporting it to the administrator gods on high. It launched in 2010, and it seems to still be active? Apparently? Y'all alive over there? I thought FF.net had died years ago, so, there's that. Their FAQ explains that they were getting tired of trying to find good stories. We both were critics and were already getting used to getting angry authors who didn't want to hear that their story was against the rules. We were tired of all the poorly written rule-breaking fics that were swarming the site, overshadowing writing that was allowed to be posted. Now, to clarify, what are FF.net's oh-so-hollowed rules? There's a whole host of them, but to save on time, I'll break down the most important ones. Spell check all story and poetry, proofread all entries for grammar and other aspects of writing before submission, use proper textual formatting, no non-stories, 1-2-liner fics, no MST, no interactive fiction featuring second person of all things, etc., etc. And I reckon y'all can see where I'm going with this. Starkit, well, Starkit didn't really follow these rules. Followed almost none of them at all, really. It kind of spit in the face of all things regulatory when you come right down to it. So it's not much of a surprise that one of these white knighting reviewers reported the fic on July 10th, 2010. And oh ho ho, they were far from the last of their ilk to crawl out of the woodwork.
Come on, for serious. I will take the next hour of my life reporting this fic in all of its atrocity. I just, no words.
I don't even need to say anything to this. You've been reported.
You don't care that it violates the guidelines? Murderers don't care that they're killing someone, breaking the rules. You can't think of an actual reason why I shouldn't report it, huh?
You guys may not dislike this fanfic, but it doesn't excuse the fact that it violates the guidelines. If you fail to see this, then you are the idiots. Ew, I don't like it, I want to report it now. Fact is, I don't like it. Its spelling, punctuation, just about everything else is terrible. The author writes like a 13-year-old. Well, rude. And even if he/she is doing it on purpose, it still violates the rules of the site. Self-centered? I'm doing this because I care about the site's future. But wait, let me guess. You guys want people to write like this? Maybe, I don't know.
That's just scraping the tip of the iceberg. But we'd be here all day if I went through every single one of them. Trust me, I've done that. I've stared deep into the abyss. I've seen things. Horrible, agonizing things. And I may never be the same.
Warrior cats do not believe in Jesus. They cannot like cats of the same gender. It's just not possible. Star is not a valid warrior cat name.
To clarify, no. Critics United was not the only sour apple spoiling the bunch. There was a whole host of groups dedicated to hunting down fics violating the website's term of service, with the largest, of course, being Literate Union. Predating even CU by over a year, the forum rose to obscene prominence following its creation in 2009 and became one of the largest general forums on FF.net with over 415,000 posts. And they were, well, yeah. I think this speaks for itself. What can I say but yikes. Ugh, $5 says they're NFT bros now. Strangely enough, more people seem to remember Critics United than Literate Union. Despite the vast difference in scope, CU came away with far more notorious reputation in contemporary online circles, while the Union has more or less been forgotten over time. To that I can only speculate, which honestly, I did for several hundred words before I realized this is all tangential fluff to the overall discussion, bloating an already considerable runtime. Blah blah, something about outward pretension and bullying. Blah blah, you catch my drift. The point is that Starkit was published on a rigidly dogmatic website at a time where it was mired in a mindset of toxicity with an administrative staff that did little to curb the bullying influence. If anything, they indulged it, administering the swift hand of punitive justice to thousands of writers that didn't really deserve it. And, well, y'all are smart. I'm sure y'all can imagine what happens next. Anyone who knows anything about Starkit's prophecy could tell you that it is now impossible to read it on fanfiction.net without the use of the Wayback Machine's archive. It's just not there. Gone, vanished, vamoosed, your synonym of choice. It is simply defunct. And that's because it fell victim to deletion by a staff bowing to fandom tattlers. Twice. So it's not much of a surprise that one of these white knighting reviewers reported the fic on July 10th, 2010. Now, nothing came of that first report, but it was largely indicative of the tone of most of the reviews at the time, i.e. people thought it was bad and held no punches informing Dark Roses that it was bad. As a result, the author threatened to stop writing altogether on July 19th. And Wishians, they were having none of it. No, when they heard the call to action, they promptly answered, descending from on high to flood the reviews with largely positive, if not entirely legible feedback, when some chose to mimic the on-brand Dark Roses style. Mimic it a little too well, really. A few members even messaged Dark Roses directly on FF.net, with Hawkstar receiving a reply on the 20th. And lo, Dark Roses began posting chapters again on July 24th. While this certainly assuaged immediate fears of Starkit's premature conclusion, there was nevertheless a looming concern that the fic could disappear at a moment's notice. These misgivings were not helped as recent chapters would at times disappear and reappear at random, with 3 inexplicably being removed prior to the story's return to form. As such, Dawnwing proposed creating a new website to host the fic and therefore preserve it. Icebreath followed suit on this request soon afterwards, uploading the new web host to Weebly.com on August 5th. And as Dame Fortuna would have it, this proved to be remarkably fortuitous foresight as well, hippity-hoppity, the fic went chippity-choppity. Yes, unfortunately, on August 11th, year of our Lord 2010, our friends convinced the pantheon of fanfiction gods to take Gleamstar out back behind the proverbial shed and load a shooter right between the eyes. I know. Riddle, you're thinking, shouldn't you sugarcoat this metaphor? Pretend good old Gleamstar simply went to a farm upstate to live out the rest of her days in idyllic prosperity? Maybe. But I mean, hey, the fandom was praying for literal months. Bramblestar would contract rabies and go on a saliva-laden warpath, so, I think this about checks out. Where was I? Oh, right. So, yeah. At some point between the 10th and the 11th, Starkit's prophecy was removed from fanfiction.net. Just poof, gone. It caught everyone off guard, but Icebreath was quick to contact Dark Roses later that day in hopes of securing the new chapters for re-upload. Naturally, her correspondence was typical of the Starkitian cadence. You see, an intricate display of courtship dance is required to coax the average troll into communion, a practice of which Wishians were indubitably well versed in. Folks were left in limbo for a few days, but Dark Roses eventually responded on the 16th. Luckily enough, Gleamstar was gifted with 9 lives at the ripe age of infant, and her story soon returned on September 3rd. Interestingly, her revival came with a few changes here and there, such as a number of chapter titles being rewritten to sound, well, less good, at least in the grammar, spelling, and punctuation department, aka the only department critics were concerned with, aka the one that would have them hopping up and down like spring-loaded sparkleberries. Ah, trolls. So full of nitro-injected funny fuel. Comment down below what your favorite chapter title is. Mine is Chapter for Gay Stripe. I'm a simple gay of simple comedic tastes. What can I say? And with that, Starkit managed to remain on-site for a good while, long enough to reach its conclusion on June 17th, 2011. A conclusion perhaps stretching the definition of satisfying, as per the critical response, but one nonetheless many fans thought was appropriate for such a roller coaster of a story. A few months later, Starkit even garnered a sequel on January 21st, 2012, duly dubbed Starkit's Prophet 2, The Two Sibleks. The fanwork never saw completion, nor the same popularity as its predecessor had. Again, I can only speculate as to why, beyond of course the obvious Moon Kitty hasn't animated it explanation. If I were to take a crack at a guess, I'd wager it's because the story was much more obviously a trollfic. With characters like Marijuana Skin and Stroll Llama, warriors named as such for their addictions to drugs and witness testimony to llamas in a forest, the eternal question of, can someone honestly write this, is answered with resounding finality. No, they cannot. The mysterious intrigue of the author's authenticity is half the fun of trollfics, and Sexy Beast the Cat shatters that illusion with a 2-ton brick. It didn't help that the fandom was oversaturated with bad fics by 2012. As such, it's unsurprising that waning enthusiasm and hostile reviewers led to Starkit's eventual, inevitable end. Wishians noticed the original fic was again deleted by April 28th, 2012, with the sequel following only a few weeks afterwards by June 1st. Press F to pay respects. The almighty Starkit was dead. On FF.net anyways.
Quit telling everyone I'm dead!
Sometimes I can still hear his voice!
If you knew where to look, Starkit was just fine and dandy, if a little more obscure than it used to be. The previously mentioned Weebly domain was, at some point, rerouted to a different webmaster page, but the result was the same, a website hosted by Wishians that updated alongside the work-in-progress story. It last updated on December 24th, 2011. The fan work was further rehosted on Tumblr and Blogspot on October 19th, 2015, presumably by the same person, but who knows? Maybe fate divined that 2 completely different individuals would simultaneously upload a 2009 Warriors fanfic on a Thursday. Stranger things have indeed happened in this fandom, who's to say? Incidentally, this would have been just a few months after Moon Kitty uploaded the first episode of her animated adaptation. And of course, the entire story is hosted on the Starkit's Prophecy fanwiki. As far as I can tell, the page was first published on September 20th, 2016, so I can only assume the wiki itself was founded in tandem. But honestly, the interesting piece to me is that the rehosts all carry the same chapter titles as the original 2009 upload. I'm not sure if it's a dedication to the pre-deletion source material, or just the result of these uploads likely being copied from the Wishian iteration, or, well actually, they almost certainly were just duplicated over. Who am I kidding? But I digress. With the surgical excision of Starkit from FF.net, our star-studded protagonist faded from relevancy over the years. Sure, dramatic readings would crop up from time to time, but the Warriors fandom as a whole had largely moved on from Gleamstar's wacky hijinks and harebrained tomfoolery. Her time in the sun had set. And then Moon Kitty uploaded Starkit's Prophecy Episode 1. And the fandom went bananas. Yes, on February 12th, 2015, just 2 days before Valentine's Day, Moon Kitty introduced an entirely new generation of Warriors fans to Starkit. In doing so, she redefined the fan work and brought it to all new heights, like, my god, it's so next level you need an elevator to reach the top floor. A 16k word post-birth this, who'da thunk. That said, Gleamstar's colorful resurrection transpired in an era of fandom far removed from its original source material. And after an ungodly amount of hours spent researching this purple fuzzball, it occurred to me that much is therefore lost on an audience unfamiliar with the late 2000s, early 2010s fanbase. Without proper context and perspective, Starkit comes across as zany and bizarre and... Well, okay, Starkit is zany and bizarre. Lord knows I won't argue for the coherency of a shape-shifting mongoose. But when you get down to brass tacks, there's a consistent thread throughout the narrative tying everything together. A thread you will likely overlook if you don't know what to look for, as it necessitates context. Let me begin by stating the obvious. Starkit's prophecy was, above all else, a product of its time. Yes, I know, my powers of deduction are truly unparalleled. Long may my communion with the Delphic Oracle reign. Hee-hawing aside, I can't help but double down here since I honest to God believe period context is key to understanding Starkit as a whole. Every strange quirk, every head-scratcher turn of phrase, every outlandish moment that confounds a modern audience, everything has some sort of background rationale fueling the narrative that ties it all together. Well, mostly. Kinda. I promise I have a point here, just stay with me. Starkit was a product of its time, and once removed from that time, it becomes incongruous with our current understanding of online fandom. It was conceived at the turn of the decade with explicit intentionality in mind for a fledgling fandom just learning to stand on its own two legs in the nightmarish horror we today call the internet. But before we dive too deep into that, allow me to set the stage for our little literary diorama. Picture it! A mid to late 2000s World Wide Web. It was the Wild West out there, y'all. Trojan tumbleweeds and Tumby score. As ridiculous as Critics United was, or is, it was born out of a response to the sheer unregulated madness pervading fandom spaces at the time. The only real rules were ones you'd find on fandom-specific message boards. And if you didn't like those, you could just move on to the next until you found one you vibed with. Larger, more generalized platforms were of course a thing. Websites like Neopets or Wants and Worlds come to mind for us youngins of the day, but they were never dedicated to any one fanbase. It's in this online landscape where Warrior's Wish first emerged. The Warrior's official form would eventually launch and overtake it in 2009, but the website still enjoyed a monopoly on the slightly older tween-to-teen demographic of the fandom. And the nexus of Warrior's Wish, fanfiction.net, and the litany of roleplay forums on pro boards offers a glimpse into the burgeoning fandom culture of the time. And by breaking down that cultural zeitgeist, we'll finally begin to understand the elusive context that explains Starkit as a whole. So, my dear viewers, what exactly was the culture of the 2009 era Warriors fandom? Well...
Mom, can you pick me up? I'm scared.
Okay, now it wasn't that bad. Usually. But there were more than a few, quirks defining the early online fanbase, almost all of which play into the fanworks narrative. And this is because Starkit's prophecy was specifically and implicitly designed to tick off the late 2000s Warriors fandom. A troll trolling with the intention to troll? Oh, say it ain't so. It's more than a little obvious looking back, of course, but as the sheer amount of flamers can attest, most seem to miss the less than subtle disdain Starkit had for the Warriors community. Yet that contempt is what fueled every intentional contortion of the source material throughout its run, thoroughly mocking a fanbase thought so impossible to please. Take Gleamstar herself, for example. She is, by all definitions, a Mary Sue. I'd argue she's very much a classic Gen 1 Mary Sue, of the Paula Smith variety. The term originated in 1973 as the name of a character satirizing idealized author self-inserts prevalent throughout the Star Trek fandom at the time. Specifically the, female author self-inserts, that is. The author, Paula Smith, reflected decades later that she had written the story as a parodical indictment of female OCs that warped fictional universes to their will by sheer virtue of how perfect and special and awesome and wow they were. By warping universes, I mean how the story itself would break in half to center around our Miss Jane Doe, such as how she'd be awarded leadership as effortlessly as one would receive a delightful gift basket, or how canon male protagonists like Kirk and Spock would instantly line up and wait to ask for this teenage heroine's hand in marriage, irrespective of age or prior characterization. Unlike my loquacious rear end can manage, Smith and her fellow fanzine editors summed it up rather concisely in 1976. Mary Sue stories, the adventures of the youngest and smartest ever person to graduate from the academy and ever get a commission at such a tender age. Usually characterized by unprecedented skill in everything from art to zoology, including karate and arm wrestling. This character can also be found burrowing her way into the good graces / heart / mind of one of the big three, if not all three at once. She saves the day by her wit and ability and, if we are lucky, has the good grace to die at the end, being grieved by the entire ship. Is this sounding familiar yet? Basically, these Lieutenant Mary Sues were all sugar, no substance. Enough to trigger cardiac arrest and immediate enamel decay. You could practically hear the dial-up noise drumming behind those soulless, heterochromatic eyes. Or molten orange orbs, in Gleamstar's case. There's a lot more to Mary Sue history, of course, but good golly gosh, gloriosky, this video's long enough, and I need to go to bed before 4 AM. If you're curious, I recommend watching Red's Trope Talk over on Overly Sarcastic Productions for a more comprehensive breakdown. Thankfully, the hatred for all things Mary Sue has subsided over the past few years with the decline of cringe culture, but it was the rule of law in the late 2000s. Say goodbye to your credibility if someone criticized your protagonist as a Mary Sue. Your writing career was dead in the water before you'd even graduated middle school. This was especially true within the Warriors fandom, where many a juvenile critic condemned anyone for failing to meet their arbitrary standards of literary supremacy. And this is where Gleamstar comes in. Everything about Gleamstar, down to her naturally inherited purple fur to the white star adorning her forehead, was engineered to inspire cat book-loving fans to pass kittens of their own. She's born into ThunderClan, aka Protagonist Clan, to Jayfeather the Medicine Cat and Dawnsparkle of ShadowClan. We're already knocking heads here, as this was an obvious slight towards the fandom's hatred of forbidden relationships at the time. This rings especially true as it features one of the most popular characters in the series, who, by default, had no canon love interest to speak of, and shipping him with an OC, no less. Jayfeather having offspring with anyone but his beloved stick? Scandalous. Gleamstar's appearance is rather self-explanatory in her Sue-ness, so I won't dwell too much on it. The only tidbit I can really add here is my assumption the forehead star was an additional crack at the burgeoning cringe reaction to the star-studded clan leader's aesthetic popularized by Alley Cat Nia in 2007, which, thank God, we've since moved past that as a fandom, and I've seen a lot of cool reimaginations of the forehead star in recent years. Like, man, that visual design was baller, and the nerds whining about it in 2009 were soulless killjoys. There, I said it, don't give me any lip about it. Now, the real source of controversy inherent to Gleamstar's character is, well, her name. Starkit. Starkit. As in star as a prefix, as in star as not a suffix, as in that's so stupid her leader name would be Star. Things seem to have chilled out over time, but back in 2009, what constituted proper naming conventions for clan cats was a hot-button topic within the fandom. Many a flame war was fought over the acceptability of prefixes like dragon or phoenix within fanfiction, and who knows how many casualties resulted with the introductions of Billy Storm and Snookthorn in SkyClan's Destiny. You know, I have to say that this is really where a lack of context begins to affect one's reading of Starkit. I think there's always going to be fans who dislike the sillier names within Warriors. Twig Branch comes to mind as a more recent example of this. But I can't stress enough how much of a big deal this was back in ye olden days. A number of fans, particularly those within literate roleplays, consider themselves traditionalist in their approach to naming OCs. These folks preferred the more grounded approach to naming conventions, more commonly found in the first arc, with suffixes like tail, pelt, fur, etc. Now to clarify, most of these peeps were fine. Ain't nothing wrong with preferring Dust Pelt to Bounce Fire, or Mouse Fur to Harvey Moon. We've all got our proclivities, and I'm not about to judge when one of my absolute favorite names is little old Fidget Flake. No, the issue was the very vocal minority of so-called traditionalists who deemed anything tiptoeing the line of acceptability to be stupid and bad and not canon, and would hit up your DMs telling you so. Mind you, this included actually canon names like Hawkfrost, Lionblaze, and Willowshine, which, yes, were very contested in their day beyond all reason. And the peak example of bad names, the most frequently cited hypothetical as non-canon ridiculous flim-flam was, you guessed it, drumroll please, Starkit. So, naturally, Starkit was the obvious choice for naming our beloved Trollfix protagonist. It's simple math, really. And if I'm saying that, it must be 2 + 2 = fish simple because I'm stupid and numbers send me into anaphylactic shock. And now, these are all the basic building blocks of a traditional Sue, and there is no short supply of references throughout Starkit. But we'll be here all day if I keep blabbering on like this, so let's have a lightning round, shall we? Obvious prophecy, obviously referring to the protagonist. Beloved characters Bluestar, Whitestorm, and Lionheart fawning over an OC. First arc protagonist Firestar electing to mentor her and having his furry behind handed to him by said OC. Firestar favorably comparing OC to Hot Topic bad boy Scourge. Firestar, Greystripe, and Blackstar collectively going Dookie Dookie Artichoke for OC. Firestar promoting OC days into her apprenticeship, Hot Suave bad boy Hawkfrost thinking OC is kawaii. Immediately falling in love with OC, only for OC to die and then be resurrected. Firestar piecing out to retirement and making OC leader. Thunderstar appearing to OC in a dream at a time when the new writers weren't yet shoehorning Dawn of the Clans cameos into every conceivable plot point they could. Something something, Cinderpelt-esque OC reincarnation, blah blah, something dying, boom. I think you get the point. Gleamstar is a Mary Sue with a capital duh. There's no question she's furry wish fulfillment incarnate, because she was deliberately designed to be as infuriating as possible to a pretentious preteen fanbase reaching the peak of online anti-zoology in the late 2000s. It's kind of a double reach around when you think about it, parodying a trope with the intention of mocking those mocking it, but it's nevertheless effective. It's rather on the nose looking back, but I will say that modern readings are more likely to mistake parody for sincerity, if only because the late 2010s saw a critical recession in the department of cringe culture, and therefore hatred for all things Sue. Sure, we're not entirely free of it yet, but at least more and more people are realizing that, hey, maybe a 12-year-old's perfect fairy princess OC isn't an impetus for a literary Armageddon. Live and let live, Miss Sparkle Rainbow of Pretty Clan. But Mary Sue satire is just the tip of this here iceberg, and we've barely scratched the surface. No, the real, in-your-face, blood-curdling tomfoolery is, of course, the writing itself. The linguistics of Starkit. It's essentially Old English, vaguely recognizable, but nearly impossible to parse. As I've already touched upon the existence of communities like Critical United and Literate Union, y'all can probably discern that literary snobbery was prevalent throughout online spaces around 2009-2010. But to an absurd degree. A degree bordering on rather horrible implications that would net you a cum laude at PragerU. I'd rather not use the term itself, given, well, literally everything going on in the world at the moment. But it was a common adage back in the day to label folks fixated on spelling and grammar as grammar blanks. Basically, these guys were obsessed with proper syntax and sentence structure. If they were feeling nice, they would offer quote-unquote helpful, passive-aggressive critiques of a 3-sentence post you made in the span of 45 seconds. If they weren't, your grammatical faux pas would be the immediate subject of a bully pulpit informing fellow users that you were an illiterate ignoramus befitting of a dunce cap. Not only were these grammar fanatics obnoxious, but again, their rhetoric gave off concerning connotations. Although certain platforms would have you believe otherwise, given their American centrism, millions of people online aren't native English speakers and therefore, shocker, don't speak perfect English. A lot of other countries in the world, folks, look them up. Moreover, this attitude reinforced racial stereotypes with its negative biases against Black communities' usage of AAVE, aka African American Vernacular English. The same held true for Latino and Asian dialects, and there's certainly classist undertones as well. In summary, horrendous. And yes, I've been using the past tense because, dear God, I hope we've moved past entertaining these useless paperclips. Now, when it came to this sort of hullabaloo, a lot of online fans became immersed in this culture as so much of fandom is based in roleplay and fanfiction. And of course, the Warriors fandom was no different. In many ways, it was even exacerbated, given the juvenile age demographic. This sort of split itself into two camps. One camp being centered around kids who are made fun of for their amateurish writing, and the other being slightly older kids who thought their amateurish writing was far superior to the formers, all because they were taking a 9th grade honors English class. I can't speak for the contemporary roleplay climate vis-a-vis Warriors, given that I haven't touched a public forum in well over a decade. But I can reflect on the general mindset ruling the RP sphere back in 2009. There was a clear distinction between regular roleplay boards and literate roleplay boards, where one was a lot more laid back and casual, and the other was, well, the literate roleplay board. In the latter's case, there was an implicit pressure to be as detailed and excessive as possible, even if that meant regurgitating Purple Pro's PukeFest posts. Like, I love me some juicy imagery, y'all, don't get me wrong. But at a certain point, this tendency towards extravagance slowed narrative flow to a crawl with its disruptions. Introduction posts were especially prone to this, ballooning word counts for the sake of word counts alone, like a Dickens novel being paid by the serial. What in the Scooby-Doo? I ain't reading all of that. Shh, it's okay, I promise. My bestie gave me permission to use this as an example. We're all good here. Dawn Mist pretty much summed it up best over on Twitter. Remember the pressure to write roleplay intros? There were two kinds of people. Number 1, Willowpaw walked into the camp. Number 2, the ferns rustled as a pale gray head poked through, whiskers glistening with morning dew. A long body followed, paws lightly treading over the grass as her blew. Honestly, it was all pretty juvenile and telling of our age at the time. Sure, you had older folks with this attitude in the midst too, but it really was a toxic cocktail of immaturity and arrogance, boiling over in an online environment actively encouraging it. To be clear, it is not my intention to put down kids' abilities. Y'all have more talent in your pinky than I ever had. And we all have to start somewhere. I just mean to say that it's buck wild to expect literal, actual children to write Shakespeare right out of the gate. It takes years to hone a craft, and demanding a 12-year-old best Pushkin or Chikamatsu in a reply-based format is panning for gold in hot sewage water. You've only yourself to blame when you wind up with naught. Also, you're a bit of a jerk. Funny that. But I digress. As you can probably guess, this all bled over into the fanfiction side of things. Admittedly, I can't offer too much in the way of a first-hand account, but the general gist seems to be about the same, just with the added bonus of your stories getting reported if they featured one too many typos. Oh, you write there, T-H-E-R-E, instead of there, T-H-E-I-R? Oh, jail. Jail for you. Jail for you for 1,000 years. So, with all this context in mind, Starkit was perfectly poised to ruffle a few feathers within the fandom. Intentional or not, it served a dual purpose of simultaneously satirizing the clumsy writing it masqueraded as, while lampooning those who reviled it. At the very least, it's evident the author leaned into the latter more and more as the story continued, advancing an increasingly absurdist narrative riddled with errors, all the while decrying their critics as flamers, meanies, and of course, Satanists. The literary burlesque wasn't limited to the typos and grammatical mistakes, mind. Nothing was off limits as Starkit parodied the mistakes inherent to canon itself, such as killing off characters like Lakepool and Jayfeather, only for them to reappear several chapters later as if nothing had happened. Like, Heavy Step is by no means a new meme, y'all. The fanfic was first published a month after The Fourth Apprentice released. Everyone was already having a giggle over his second death, and the poor Tabby hasn't had a break since. The satire further extended into general fanfiction tropes of the time. the awkward insertion of author notes into the text itself, the mangled addition of Japanese into an otherwise exclusively English script.
That's not kawaii at all.
Wait. Ha. The gratuitous Japanese TV tropes page references Starkit? In case you didn't know, all the characters are cats. This actually makes the gratuitous Japanese more plausible. Yes, hello, hi. Baby Detour here. Adding this now because I haven't figured out where else to. But my favorite piece of Starkit trivia is that the original TV tropes page was deleted on September 1st, 2010 by Fast Eddie, aka the website's founder, aka the man who sold said website for $2.5 million in 2014, with the only explanation given being, and I quote, "Another bile fest about a fanfic. Boring." It was unlocked a week later on the 7th. Iconic. Anyway, hilariously, on a Simpsonian level of prophetical parody, Starkit's satire in time has foreshadowed actual canon. As I said before, Thunderstar offering Gleamstar life during her leadership ceremony was intended to satirize similar stunts of O.C. Grandeur, but, I guess Mothflight's just doling out lives like hotcakes, giving Tall Star one and appearing at Hazel Star ceremony. But even more significantly, Ashfur returning to the world of the living via a Star Clan portal for the explicit purpose of wedding an uninterested she-cat and committing violent felonies because she does not return his affections. Yeah, Starkit did that first. The broken code. Oops. It's a bizarre turn of events when a decade-old absurdist parody manages to spoof new book releases. I guess you really do either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain, huh? Heck, you could even argue Starkit predicted the gradual Christianization of the warrior's narrative vis-a-vis a problematic afterlife and its rigidly conformist kitty cat followers. But that is a can of worms we're not going to get into today. We're instead going to mire ourselves in another kind of worms. Christianity baiting and ironic homophobia. Hooray! Oh, I'm so tired. To preface a section that is by its nature inevitably more volatile in its material, let me begin by explaining some of my background. The short of it is that I'm a lesbian who grew up in a Christian household. Rather find myself drifting betwixt the vague, interdimensional hallways of agnosticism and atheism nowadays, but that's neither here nor there. I bring these details up because I want y'all to know I'm approaching this subject from a certain perspective sympathetic to the author's intentionality. And yes, there is an explicit intentionality here that I will get into soon enough. Let's tackle the gay stuff first. I think we can all agree that homophobia is capital B bad. And if you're watching this video thinking it isn't, goodbye, I guess? The rest of us can agree that every brand of queerphobia is horrible and no one should ever stand for it. This, of course, leaves Starkit in a bit of a pickle, what with its early comedy. Now, I'm not going to defend the fics' comedic take on homophobia, but... Okay, no, hear me out. I promise I have a point to make. For those unaware who have somehow gotten this far into the video, Dark Roses originally presented herself as a naive 11-year-old Christian whose homophobic beliefs were copy-pasted into Starkit's narrative. Homophobic statements are littered throughout the first half of the fan work, as either author notes or character dialogue, with Gleamstar going so far as to claim the 11th commandment prohibits cats from being gay. These scenes are almost always immediately undercut by something gay happening, such as Redpaw and Lakepool kissing, or by Gleamstar being singled out as the only cat who has a problem with it. Then you have her sister Flamepelt, who technically serves as the narrative impetus for Gleamstar's character development. When the heterochromatic she-cat is met with rejection by her mate and Gleamstar for being bisexual, she runs off to join the Satan clan, proclaiming, "I'm evil now, bye!" This leaves Gleamstar in a state of shock, which inadvertently leads to the restoration of her past life's memories. I know it's weird, you really just gotta roll with me on this one. The author herself even undergoes a character arc speedrun, with Dark Roses coming out as a lesbian following a precursory introduction to Slash. Slash fanfiction is apparently the gateway drug to sexuality. It's a joke. The joke is parodying homophobic Christians who are themselves gay. The homophobia is repeatedly drummed up to mock religious zealots throwing hissy fits over the very concept of gay, making them out to be ignorant children throwing temper tantrums over literally nothing. Which, isn't an inaccurate depiction of homophobes. The homophobe is actually a closeted, self-hating gay trope is in of itself tired and problematic, but that's another matter. What does matter is that Gleamstar undergoes a character arc where her star-studded head is pulled free from her furry behind, and she realizes she was wrong about her previously bigoted beliefs.
You know what that is? It's gross.
If you're wondering why this would be in a Warriors fanfic of all things, well, the fandom wasn't always known for being LGBT friendly. I reckon this detail flies over newcomers' heads nowadays, given how inclusive the creative factions of the fanbase currently are, but it wasn't such a guarantee back in 2009. It was considered a much more sensitive, hot-button issue, one that can spark unwanted controversy and should therefore be ignored and undiscussed. The kitty cat equivalent of "don't ask, don't tell" for my American viewers. Any question of gay representation was chalked up to Slash for Slash's sake, and wasn't afforded further merit beyond that. Or worse yet, were the folks who actively railed against the depiction of characters as anything but straight, whining that cats can't be gay. Or, as one audacious reviewer commented, there are genes in animals that prevent it from happening. Ah, sonny boy, do I have a yarn to spin for you. Discussions of trans headcanons were met with even more resistance. I'll bet that more so started to gain mainstream traction closer to the mid-2010s. Blah blah, cats can't be trans. IDK man, I can't hear you over the sound of Redtail and Rowanclaw being trans AF. And sure enough, all of this wasn't helped by Vicky's 2009 assertion that homosexuality and drug addiction were two topics that would never fit into any of the books, given that they don't sit easily in a series about feral cats. Times have changed since then, of course. Who could forget old Rocky's addiction to catmint in Mothflight's vision? But I honestly don't hold this against Vicky. It was over a decade ago, she's been more than supportive of Raven Barley in the period since, and she's never once wavered in her support of young readers no matter their orientation. That, and I can only imagine the limitations of children's literature are, well, limited, and were particularly so at the time. I just mention this as it sort of reflected the mentality of the day and age. LGBT themes are irrelevant to Warriors and therefore are not subject to discussion. This was basically the norm for most sites. I know on Warriors Wish that most of the LGBT-specific conversation for a time was featured in one thread, and one thread only, as a means of sidestepping trolling and the don't ask, don't tell mindset as per the thread's creator. I largely kept to that little bubble, so I can't speak for other websites, but I am 99.9% certain the same held true for the Warriors official forum and similar platforms. Actually, scratch that. I'm 100% positive for the forum. Moonpool, you will let me say gay. Now, despite its satiric intentionality, I'd wager the comedic homophobia throughout Starkit has likely aged the worst over time. I've seen several comments on videos and the fan wiki expressing frustration over it, upset by the inclusion at all. I'm not altogether certain whether they got the joke or not, but it's telling the focus of their vexation with Starkit is fixated on perceived homophobia, no longer just the bad writing and Mary Sue-isms. It says, at least to me, that queerphobia is no longer seen as an accepted truism within the community that you're expected to shrug off. And honestly, I couldn't be happier that's the case. Small tangent here, but I am so glad to be at a point where being LGBT within this fandom is not only accepted, but normalized. This series is oriented towards children, yes, and I don't think enough folks appreciate how important it is for kids to see themselves in media made for them. I believe that every time popular content creators come out as gay, or trans, or ace, or anything in between, you are helping to change a kid's life. Realizing you're not alone, that you aren't broken, that there are others out there like you is just... it's so important, y'all. The book series itself may never openly depict us, and I have many feelings on that. But the fanbase makes up for it in an abundance of headcanons and ship art and animations and so on. Okay, that was a longer tangent than I intended, but this stuff means a lot to me. Go figure. That said, I can only convey my sincerest hope that the kids expressing bigotry back in the day have since, well, chilled out. And if you're asking why I'm giving them the time of day, I'm really not. I'm just cognizant of the fact that people can change a lot over the course of a decade, and doubly so when you're a child becoming a hopefully better informed adult. Because this breed of queerphobia does not exist in a vacuum. Kids pick up things from their friends and family and other people in their lives, where they then go on to parrot rubbish they don't fully understand. I'd wager that much of this was rooted in complicated feelings surrounding religiosity and the like. And yes, this is my incredibly unsubtle segue into Christianity baiting. Ha ha! Oh, lordy. My phenomenal transition aside, this subject is one I can't say I have much to speak on, funnily enough. It's all rather straightforward from my perspective. Starkit, in every sense of the word, mocks over-the-top Christian fundamentalism. It specifically mocks the fundamentalism parroted by children online, imitating the supposed experts in their lives. Experts who themselves are incredibly limited in their understandings of the core material, no matter how loudly they attempt to convince you otherwise. It's a breed of religious zealotry that preaches hellfire upon those who do not conform to its dogmatic rigidity, and children who have not enjoyed the life experiences beyond such stringent boundaries will inevitably repeat absurd prattle without any real comprehension of what it means. Huh. I can already feel the rifle levied at my head behind me. Neat. To clarify, this is not intended to condemn Christianity as a whole, nor is it meant to trivialize minors' intelligence. I swear I'm not trying to offend here, y'all. I'm even purposefully withholding jokes to be straight to the point. Just younger kids kinda repeat things they hear as fact, whether it be from their families, or their friends, or their surrounding communities. And when religious-based homophobia was far more normalized in an era where children were increasingly gaining access to a then unregulated internet, these supposed facts spewed forth with reckless abandon. Across forums, across fan sites, across even fanfiction. And Starkit parodies that. Acutely. Its absurd, utterly surreal story satirizes the ugly warts inherent to these beliefs, ballooning them to such extremes that any reader outside the most fanatic can easily see their ignorance on full display. Or, at least it was intended to. Poe's law and all that. You can even argue that Starkit parodies children's quick turnarounds once they're exposed to outside perspectives. I've joked about it here, sure, but Slash as a genre actually was eye-opening for certain folks because it introduced them to pairings outside the restrictive bounds of heteronormativity. Like, quick poll for y'all. How many people watching didn't realize certain ships were viable as a kid because you didn't even know it was an option? I know a lot of ships went over my head for that reason. Same for many others. Of course, no one could absolve themselves of culturally ingrained prejudice as swiftly as Dark Roses did within mere chapters, nor resolve their ensuing identity crisis over orientation with such ease. But the development nevertheless reflected a real nugget of truth to how kids of the time were reconciling previously unchallenged beliefs with those outside their sheltered communities. And with such disdain for the status quo, Starkit predictably drew the ire of these kids. Whether they realized they were being made fun of, or were taking the allegations of Satanism at face value, the overtly Christian readers were, a little unhappy, to say the least. The easiest way to bait a 10-year-old is to call them a Satanist, apparently. You know, it's kinda crazy how so many people just never seem to catch on. The whole point of calling readers Satanists was to bait them into angry temper tantrums, and the more they whined about it in reviews, the more the authors kept calling them that. Simple rinse, wash, and repeat, like, what did they expect? You know, Starkit sort of reads as a vehicle for edgy atheist tweens to razzle the fundy Christian sects of the fandom. It just makes me wonder, you know, just who Dark Roses actually was. Or, well, I suppose I should say were, because I don't need to wonder. I already know who they are. Whoa, no, hang on. Oh geez, yeah. We're gonna have to have this discussion for the next video. I am so sorry to leave folks on a cliffhanger here. This was always intended to be a two-parter, but I was under the assumption I could include my author quest within the first half when I set about scripting this monstrosity of a project. And then the word count kept growing, and growing. And as is, it's about to surpass my graduate dissertation in length, and my pride demands someone shoot me dead before I'm that far gone. It's gonna be a hot minute before that's out. But before we end here today, I wanted to have a little wrap-up, reflecting on what we've learned and why it matters. Well, I guess why it matters to me anyways. Who knows what y'all are gonna think? Good things? Bad things? Wanna punt me into the stratosphere things? I can't fathom a clue. Leave a comment below telling me said things. Haha. Please, I've got a family to feed. But anyways, as I've said before, Starkit is above all else a product of its time, for better or worse. To those who saw through its satirical wit, the work was a clever dissection of a young fanbase struggling to find its bearings in a yet unregulated internet. It was surreal in its absurdity, yes, and most assuredly an elevated post, but there was nevertheless a point to its wacky hijinks and zany developments. Starkit as a story was disruptive to the fandom landscape, challenging burgeoning conventions by actively mocking them. From concepts as banal as traditional naming and literary snobbery, to the far more pernicious as casual homophobia and parroted religiosity, Starkit was designed to reflect the worst of the fandom and lay bare its inherent flaws with comedic exaggeration. Once surgically excised and displaced from that time period, however, Starkit slips from its contextual moorings and is left adrift amidst an ever-turbulent, ever-changing digital ocean. The internet is a very different place now, and the fanbase in turn has fundamentally changed over the past decade. And with that change has wrought a total loss of context that leaves much of the fanworks audience untethered from Starkit's objective purpose. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Moonkitty's animated adaptation, since it capitalizes on and thereby enhances the outlandish nature of Gleamstar's story through a visual medium. Had she not begun her series, Starkit inevitably would have fallen into internet obscurity, and I would not have spent the past few months painstakingly working on this video. That said, the fanwork feels increasingly out of place with the march of time. It's still well beloved, of course. Just searching it on Tumblr or Twitter nets you hundreds of pieces of fan art, many made within recent months. But again, it's become more comedy for comedy's sake than the original biting satire. Without previous foreknowledge, younger audiences are more likely to mistake the satire as genuine, as sincere. The erosion of context leaves the parodical dissection of fandom homophobia and religiosity especially prone to misinterpretation as earnest expressions of bigotry. Honestly, it's a fascinating phenomenon, you know? The farther out we get from Starkit's original publishment, the less sense it makes. To a point, that sort of enhances the surrealism on a purely comical level, but it also negatively affects one's experience with it, whether it be because the topics upset you, or because you simply don't have enough perspective to get the jokes. At the risk of butchering the brilliant Super Eyepatch Wolf's writing, I wanted to offer a quote I think serves as a fantastic summarization of a similar phenomenon. I think entertainment isn't meant to last forever. Rather, it's an extension of the people and places that made it at a particular moment in time. Starkit is, in many ways, an extension of the 2009 fandom. It satirizes a niche period of history that really only those who bore witness to its inception will ever be able to fully appreciate. It's always going to be funny on some level. Its lasting popularity with Moon's series is evidence enough of that. But time's steady arrow leads to an inevitable depreciation of value the farther removed we are from its origin. Still, I can't help but hope I was able to restore some of that value. If y'all managed to stick it out through this video, Godspeed, y'all are saints. We'll continue our Starkitian journey next time as I indisputably, unequivocally, with absolute certainty, unmask good old Dark Roses and explain how their authorship impacts their fics reading. And that's it for me, for now. I hope y'all have a fantastic day. Hey, so I just wanted to give a huge shout out to a couple of folks who helped make this video what it is. I am a huge newbie to these sorts of larger projects, and their help was invaluable, my god. So much thanks to my girlfriend, my bestie Tar, my buddies Sunnyfall, Moonkitty, Kat, Ed, Charlie, Nivriz, and others, for editing my monster of a script and providing voices for our eccentric commentators. And of course, thanks so much to the folks over on the Warriors Wish Discord. Y'all are lovely. Again, it'll be a hot minute to edit everything for the next leg of this project, but I promise it's gonna be one doozy of a video. See y'all soon. Hopefully.